In this video I'm going to show how my custom rig works for this DeathBlossom character. The character being from the Infiltrator demo that Epic released quite recently for Unreal Engine 4. I just thought it would be a cool character to rig. And I wanted to share it publicly, so I'm pretty much making this video just to show just to kind of show generally what's going on. So if you open the file and you don't know where to start or what's going on, then this should clear things up for you. So to start off with, I've got pretty much everything layered so that it's easy to deal with, and by default when you first open the file, these layers will be set up like this, so that the bones are hidden and frozen, the model is visible but frozen, the controllers are visible and not frozen, and the extras are hidden and frozen. So bones, model and all that's self-explanatory, but the extras are basically any extra objects that I use to create the rig with that you shouldn't touch is in this layer. So everything is also set up so that it can only move or rotate or scale if you are supposed to be able to do so, so they will be locked. So even if you unhide and unfreeze all these things, you shouldn't be able to mess with them and potentially break the rig. So anyway, the way the rig works is my main rig base. I have this thing, and you'd be using this pretty much only if you were doing a cinematic animation with this character, and you have exported your scene and there's buildings or something and he starts there behind the building. Then you can use that to place him. Pretty much what that allows you to have is, when you then animate the character, the root would be in the correct place, and that's kind of how that's set up. So these main controllers here, this one is it's centered on the actual body of the character, and it'll move and rotate the whole character. So this is for your flying animations. So if you're doing a flying cinematic or a flying animation and he's hovering around, like if you were doing a character animation, it would be in place, so you wouldn't be moving him around all over the place, but you'd still be maybe going up and down or rotating a little, and that'll allow you to do that. And then I also have this extra control for if you happen to do an animation where the thing is standing on the ground, this body will allow you to have the kind of the leg IK, or I guess the arm / leg IK working. So I guess that'll bring me to these controls. So I've got these guys, which are the main arms that I use to if this guy's going to stand on the ground, I'm guessing, or I'm thinking that they'll be standing on these legs or arms. I guess they're arms because they have hands. And so this is where the IK comes in, so those guys will stick to the ground properly. And you can rotate them, and then also have these extra controls on them that you can use to pivot them if you want to do that. So okay, and then on a bunch of these controls I have these extra custom attributes, and that's just for some extra stuff. Like on these legs, it allows me to control that extra joint because there's a double joint there. Instead of like on a normal arm you would have just a single joint there, and then the wrist would be over there, and in which case you know the joint can only go one way, but now because of the double joint you have extra control there. And I put controls like this, and the swivel I put it on there because I wanted to try and keep all these floating controls to a minimum, even though there are a lot of them anyway. I wanted to keep them you know, just as few as possible. So controls like the finger controls, you will be able, they're just pure FK setup, so you can control it like this, where you select, you can just double click on the one finger and it'll select everything else down the line. And just make sure that your pivot control is set to pivot instead of center. I mean selection, so it's center on pivot instead of selection. And then you can have this sort of thing that you can do this on biped and stuff as well. It's kind of a global feature that you can do this kind of thing. So that's how you go about posing the fingers pretty much. And then, you know, there are other controls like you know, anything that's essentially as FK setup, you'll be able to deal with like that. Yeah, so I'll just drag some of these other things out. So we've got that guy, and we've got the machine gun guy, machine gun arm. So almost all the arms, I guess all the arms except for this one, it pretty much deals with IK. And this one I did with FK because it has these two ball joints, one right next to the other. And to set up IK, you basically need to set up this one joint with IK, and that just does make sense to me. So I have this one extra control that you would use for posing it. Instead of with IK, you'd have the control there and just drag it, but I felt like this is just cleaner. It just feels better. So like for the gun arm, you can just check the custom attributes, so you can extend the arm. So if whatever controller you've got selected, there might be some custom attributes floating around that you can use. So as far as the root goes, the root isn't directly animatable. It's gonna basically do automatically what it should do. And I'll just mention that I haven't done actual real testing with this as an actual character that you can control in the game or in a game. And so the root motion stuff is set up based on my knowledge of how root motion works in previous rigs that I've created with root motion. And the biggest difference between previous stuff that I've done and this one is the root actually has an offset, so you can see the body is where the body pivot sits. The root's not underneath it. So on a typical human character or biped character, you actually would have those aligned on the XY. They both sit on 0. In this case, the root is forward of the body, and so when you animate the body and you know, when you're doing root motion, essentially the root should be following the pelvis or the body in this case. So to use the root motion, first of all, you can go in here and just click use root motion, and then that would enable it, and you can and it would work as any as my previous character rigs that I've posted as well. So you can drag it and it'll follow. And this one is for ground, so you can see there's a slider for ground versus air. So this one will always stick to the ground. And it'll also respect rotation. And you can see what the offset is actually forcing it to do. It's actually, when you rotate it, it needs to actually move along that arc that you're rotating. to stay in the correct position, because if you have your capsule sitting over here and you rotate it around and you don't do that move, then the capsule will still just sit here, and that's wrong, right? You don't want the character to move outside of its own capsule when you rotate the animation. And so that's the part that in theory I'm thinking this will work just fine, but in practice I haven't actually tested it, so I would actually need to go and create a setup for that and test and make sure that it works 100%, but you know, it's something I don't know when I'll get to that. You know, it's some point that'll happen, I guess. So I'm using root motion and I'm on ground, so even now if I want to fly off, the root's going to stick to the ground, and this is why I did this setup, so you can have this combination setup where you actually have direct control over how you want to bring the root up to the you know, when you start flying. So if you had an animation where, you know, you're running along the ground and then jump maybe to fly, you want to bring that root up and then you can just animate it up. And I felt like this is a good way to just have it in a way where you can get away with having sort of a one fits all kind of setup. So for exporting, the way I've got it set up is just like my previous characters. You just grab all the bones and export it, but I just wanted to mention a little bit about scale in this video. So because I've seen some people mention that they have scaling problems. So really with scale, you just need to make sure in your units you're using generic units, and then in your actual unit setup, by default Max will use generic units, and it'll use one unit equals 1 inch, and that's fine actually, even though Unreal uses centimeters. Where it counts is when you import or export. So if you want to make your own life much easier, you can change this to centimeters. Mine is inches because I always pretty much use default settings as you know, in these kind of things. So that's why my files are generally will be inches. And so I'm gonna keep it on inches just to show how you deal with that. It's actually pretty straightforward. So keep it on inches. And so where it becomes very important to know what's going on is when you import. So so when I imported this character to create the rig, this is what I had to take notice of. So this is the FBX that I had for that I exported from Unreal, and on the scale on the units in advanced options units, the scale factor is what matters. So I think by default it'll be automatic, and you can see what it just did. It switched it over to inches, and that's because my scene is set to use inches. And so if you change that before importing to centimeters, this will be all good. You won't have any problems. But if you did not, if you were just using default settings, you would be set to inches, and if you didn't scroll down and looked at this, you wouldn't see that this is wrong. And I think my guess is that this is where most people have problems with getting stuff from Unreal into Max and getting scales correctly correctly set up. So regardless of whether you're using inches or not, centimeters, even millimeters, or whatever you're using, as long as when you import you've got the correct setting. So I'm importing a file that was exported with centimeters in mind because it came from Unreal, so I'm going to set it to centimeters, and that will give me a 1-to-1 import ratio. So that's where that's kind of where this stuff matters. So if you ever have any scale problems and you imported stuff or exported stuff, this is probably where it went wrong for you. And the same goes for exporting. So if you now export so if you export this file, you're gonna select all the bones, and you're gonna only select the bones, and that's why I have them in a separate layer. That's one reason why I have them in a separate layer. You can either do it here in the Scene Explorer. If you don't have this Scene Explorer, you don't use the Scene Explorer, you can just do it through the Layers tab as well. So you can just go to the bones layer and select, and it'll also select, even though it's hidden and frozen, doesn't matter, the layer will actually select all those bones. And then you can export selected, and you would always only export selected, right? If you export the full scene, you're gonna get a load of stuff in there that you just don't want. And I think Unreal will probably give you some. I'm not sure if it'll give you any errors, but you'll have a bunch of stuff in that file that you really don't want in there. So before I actually export this, I'm just gonna open up this animation that I did. It's just a little test animation. Basically the thing just opens up. So I'm gonna select all the bones. I have a shortcut for exporting selected because I do it a lot. I'm gonna export that. I'll overwrite the existing file. So again, just take the time. If you keep doing the same thing, you don't always have to check this, but I guess I've made a habit out of it. I will always just come and check this. Does it say 1? Unless I'm doing the same thing over and over and over and over. If a day goes by and I haven't exported anything, the next time I'll just come back and check again. I'm just, that's just one of those things. So just double check that. If it's generally on export, when you set it to automatic, it should be fine, because it should match your system values. So, it should be okay. It really, where things generally would go wrong is on the import, so that's actually more important to check that. That one I'll always check. So yeah, okay, so I exported it and go to Unreal, and so this is just a little test project that migrated the thing to, just not to have to deal with the Infiltrator project, because that thing is so heavy. I just don't want to deal with all that stuff, all the extra stuff that it's got in there. Just deal with this character on its own. So I've got this one set so that it'll play this, basically this animation, which is one of Epic's animations that is included in the Infiltrator project. So it's just I'm just running simulate. So just to show that the one that I exported actually loads up onto this character properly. So that's a default Epic animation. That's the correct skeletal mesh and scale and all that stuff. And so now I'll import my animation. And of course you have to select the correct skeleton and import. And I can basically just drop this directly onto that character, and it'll, and so you see, so even though the position changed because the body positions are different, the scale is still correct. There's nothing weird going on, and it animates correctly. So that's pretty much that. The old DeathBlossom rig, I guess. Yeah, so if you happen to check this out and maybe you come across something weird, maybe I missed something, maybe you tried to do something and you couldn't do it, or whatever the case might be, post on the forum. I'll see if I can check it out for you. And especially, like I mentioned, the root, I did not specifically do any real testing with it. If you happen to use anything with root motion and it's giving you some kind of problems, please let me know about it. Yeah, so I guess that's it for this video. So yeah, I hope somebody finds a use for this, and yeah,